order this meeting of the Town Council of Los Gatos of August 2nd. And if I could ask for a roll call, please.
Sure. Councilmember Saya?
Here.
Councilmember Hudes?
Here.
Councilmember Badami?
Here.
Vice Mayor Risto?
Here.
Mayor Rennie?
And I'm here also. Thank you. Everybody is here. If you could roll the meeting decorum video, please.
The public is welcome to participate at town council meetings, understanding that the purpose of the meetings is to conduct the important business of the town in an efficient and effective manner. At each meeting, the following expectations of civil conduct shall apply. 1. For the benefit of the entire community, the town of Los Gatos asks that all speakers follow the town's meeting guidelines by treating everyone with respect and dignity. This is done by following meeting guidelines set forth in state law, in the town code, and on the cover sheet of the council agenda. 2. The town embraces diversity and strongly condemns hate speech and offensive hateful language or racial intolerance of any kind at council meetings. 3. Town council and staff are well aware of the public's right to disagree with their professional opinion on various town issues. However, antisocial behavior, slander, hatred, and bigotry statements are completely unacceptable and will not be tolerated in any way, shape, or form at town council meetings. 4. All public comments at the town council meeting must pertain to items within the subject matter jurisdiction of the town and shall not contain slanderous statements, hatred, and bigotry against non-public officials. 5. The town will go through the following steps if a disturbance results from a member of the public not following these rules. If participating remotely, town staff may mute the individual with an explanation for the record of why muting occurred consistent with this policy. If participating in person, the mayor may call a recess for violation of this policy, resulting in the immediate cessation of the audio and video recording and the council exiting the chamber. Staff will determine if the individual should be removed or if all members of the public should leave, depending on the extent of the disturbance. In the event that all public members exit, only the press would be allowed back in the meeting. Once the individual or individuals leave, the council would return to the chamber and the mayor would resume the meeting. Persons disrupting a council meeting may be cited for violation of the California Penal Code Section 403. These expectations of conduct also apply to meetings of all town boards, committees, and commissions.
All right, thank you. First up, we have a presentation of a commendation for our outgoing town clerk, Shelley Neese, who has been with us for a lot of years. I don't know how many. Do we have a commendation? I will go ahead and read the commendation. So did Shelley turn on her video also? So whereas Shelley Neese served the town of Los Gatos from February 1, 1989 to June 30th, 1993 and June 14th, 1999 to July 29th, 2022. So there was a gap in there, but she's been with the town at least starting in 1989. So that's a lot of years of service. Whereas during these periods, she unselfishly contributed her time, energy, and capabilities to the Community Development Department and the Clerk Department. Whereas the Town Council feels that such outstanding public service deserves special recognition. Therefore, the Council of the Town of Los Gatos does hereby render with special appreciation, commendation, and thanks to Shelley Neese for dedicated public service to the Town of Los Gatos and its residents. So I also want to thank you for all my 8 years being here in Los Gatos Council and helping us out, and all of you've done for the council and for the town of Los Gatos. Would any other council members wish to say anything? Vice Mayor Risto.
I can't pass up the opportunity to publicly thank Shelley. You've been the outward face of town chambers and, coming to the office over all the years, all of the assistance you've rendered to me. I've been on commission since 2014 and getting me through all the forms I had to fill out and everything else. But particularly when I was running for council in 2020, running into so many roadblocks that were my own issues trying to fill out forms, and you were available at all hours on the weekends. Just your absolute professionalism and your care and kindness to all of us and the desire to go above and beyond. I just can't tell you how much I appreciate it. So thank you so much. And I hope you won't be a stranger in Los Gatos and around town.
Thank you. And I won't be. I will be around town occasionally. Thank you very much.
Sounds good. Councilmember Seah.
Thank you. And Shelley, I'm going to ditto a lot of what Vice Mayor Risto said, but I think for members of the public, one thing that the Vice Mayor said was that you go above and beyond. And I think a lot of people don't realize that you and so much of our staff, but you in particular, are also very well regarded and respected throughout the Bay Area. I know that I've seen the work that you've done within the state of California, participating in Clerks Association. And I think a lot of members of our community aren't aware of our staff and specifically you and what you've done that goes beyond our town boundary. So thank you. And you will be missed. And we're very excited to have Wendy with us. But as Maria said, you've been invaluable in your assistance to me and your service to the town. So thank you.
Thank you very much.
Thank you. Councilmember Badami.
I think everything's been pretty well stated. So I just also wanted to personally thank you, Shelley, for your service. Thank you and enjoy your retirement.
Thank you very much. Thank you all.
Thank you. You will definitely be missed.
Thank you. It's been a pleasure serving the town for the last 23 years. Thank you all very much.
Okay, so let's move on to council matters. If I could start with Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I'm going to roll back the calendar to June. And following our last official council meeting, we had a couple of special council meetings on the general plan. But let's see, on June 30th, I was able to stick my head in on the promenade briefly. And then on July 7th, I was able to participate more in that. July 4th, I attended the symphony in the park that went on. It was nicely attended. And then on July 14th, I also participated in the promenade briefly. And then skipping ahead, I took a little bit of time off, went to the East Coast, but then on the 25th, I participated in a tour of the Los Altos Community Center to understand how they deliver senior services and community services to the whole community. I also participated in the Senior Service Committee meeting on the 25th in the afternoon, and then participated in the webinar on business license modernization, which is the topic of our the agenda items tonight. Then on the 27th July, I attended the senior picnic that was put on by LGS Rec in front of the municipal building. And that was very, very well attended. Got to meet quite a few people there. Then on the 28th, I participated in the Silicon Valley Regional Interoperability Authority board meeting, where again, they discussed the possibility of unencrypting communications. They've been through this whole process through encrypting them, but there's now a Senate bill that's considering undoing that and the impact of that. And that's actually something that some communities are establishing a position about, particularly the public safety officers don't seem to be in favor of that. And so it might be something we might want to consider. And then I participated in the special meeting of the Finance Commission on the 28th. And that was pretty much it before tonight's meeting. Thank you.
Thank you. Lots going on for you. Let's go with Councilmember Sayak next.
Thanks. I do want to acknowledge the Sounds of Summer series that has been going on. It's been so lovely to have live music and seeing so many members of our community. The other area that I'd like to bring to attention to the council is that the Cities Association will be bringing forward a draft JPA that will formalize the association so that the collaborative efforts that every city in Santa Clara County is more institutionalized and more formalized. And so that will be something on a future agenda. And so just wanted to flag that on your radar. Thank you.
Thank you, Councilmember Sayak. Let's go with Vice Mayor Risto next.
Thank you. I think, everybody knows, even though the council in theory has July off, our staff didn't, and neither did our council. So, we all had our other committee and commission board meetings, and I won't go through the laundry list of meetings I attended, but I did also get to enjoy the second summer of the promenades, which, the chamber put on and so many people enjoyed. Jazz in the Plaz, and our July 4th event, which was so lovely to be back after a 2-year hiatus. And so, even though the virus is with us, even though we have a high positivity rate in our community, I think when people are outdoors and spread out, we are really starting to get back to a wonderful new normal. The two things I was able to do was fill in for the mayors and managers meeting for the last 2 months. And in June, we had a representative from Santa Clara Valley Water talking about the drought, reminding people that, we're not meeting our goals for cutbacks, and literally 50% of water at most households is used for landscaping. So, this is the time to remember brown is the new green. And, check your sprinklers, make sure you're only watering once a week. We've got a whole list of suggestions on the town website and at the water district. And then last week at the mayors and managers meeting, we had a representative from Silicon Valley Clean Energy. And, Los Gatos has been a leader in terms of adopting REACH codes. And our community has saved a lot of money switching over to green energy. We're getting the same energy, but from a better source. So that's fantastic. And then finally, just a heads up to our council members and other people who might be interested. Next month on August 18th, it's the annual Silicon Valley Bike Summit. I think I've been going to those for almost 10 years, but it's an opportunity to network from people from San Mateo and Santa Clara County that are working on all different aspects of active transportation. And I'm proud to say that we were invited. Our Parks and Public Works personnel will be presenting on the quick build bike lanes on Winchester. And that invitation came from people from other communities talking about what an amazing job we've done. So that's it for right now. Thanks.
Thank you, Vice Mayor. Thank you for filling in for me. You also filled in for the welcome on the 4th of July. I wasn't able to arrive until after the welcome time. So thank you for that also. Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. During the month of July, I attended the Thursday promenades as sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce. On July 13th, I met with the chair of the Community Health and Senior Services Commission. On July 14th, I met with the chair of the Special Senior Services Committee. On July 25th, I attended the community meeting on proposed changes to the business license tax. And on July 28th, I attended the Special Finance Commission meeting as an observer. And I don't have the date in front of me, but I also attended Drums in the Park, as also sponsored by the Chamber of Commerce.
All right, thank you. And I want to thank all the council members. Since June 21st, our last regular meeting, I counted we've had 6 special sessions or closed sessions. Council was supposed to be on break, but continued to work. So I want to thank all the council members for all of those sessions and all the work that we got done for them. For me, since June 21st, our last meeting, I attended the Cities Association Legislative Action Committee on 6/23. On 7/6, the Bay Area Air Quality Management District Board met. Also on 7/6, I visited an ADU model by Simby Home that are designed to fit into a garage. In other words, you can convert your garage to an ADU. It's designed to be a cheaper way to get an ADU by providing a choice between 2 types of ADU designs that can be built less expensively with materials that are all ready to go. And I shared that information also with our town manager to see how we could also make it easier for that cheaper, easier model to be used in Los Gatos. I think they may even be having an application coming at some point in Los Gatos, I was told by them. On 7/8, I was a witness in court for the Roland LeBron case where he had made mention of a gun in comments during a VTA Policy Advisory Committee meeting and had a restraining order against him and so forth. And I was one of the subpoenaed witnesses to talk about my hearing of that meeting and what I've, Roland has basically been making comments at VTA meetings for the last 8 years that I've been involved. On 7/11, I chaired the Bay Area Quality Management District Legislative Committee meeting. On 7/14, we did a ribbon cutting for a new restaurant in town called the Palenteria. It's connected to the catering place that's behind Mountain Charlie's, right near the stairs there. It's a small Italian white tablecloth restaurant. Looked like something I definitely wanted to get back to try, but haven't made it quite yet. On 7/17, we had our first music in the park for almost 3 years. And I gave the welcome for that. So that was fun to have our music in the park back on Sundays. On 7/19, I met with our new high school superintendent and got to know him a little bit. He just started with replacing the old superintendent who has retired. And on 7/20, the Bay Area Quality Management District Board met again. And on 7/25, I had a discussion about our parklets. The town manager and our economic vitality manager joined me to meet with a council member from Napa, Liz Alessio. They wanted to learn about our implementation of our parklets program and what learnings we had from it and how they might be able to implement it in Napa. So we shared a lot of thoughts with them. And on 7/28, the Finance Commission met to discuss the business tax modernization options. And they made a motion for a recommendation for what they thought the council should do. And that will be on our regular agenda later this evening. And on 8/1, I chaired the Silicon Valley Clean Energy Finance and Admin Committee where we reviewed our budget proposal. That brings me up to date. So I will go to manager matters.
Thank you and good evening, everyone. On August 11th, everyone is welcome to the Boulevard Cafe for Coffee with a Cup. We're going to get together at 7:30 in the morning until 10 o'clock. So come by and meet our law enforcement officers and enjoy a cup of coffee. Thank you.
All right, that was quick. So next up is going to be our consent calendar, which consists of items 1 through 15. Would any council members wish to pull an item from consent? Seeing none, would any members of the public wish to comment on an item on consent calendar? Seeing none, I'll close the public comment for the consent calendar and come back to council. Would any council members like to make any comments about any item on the agenda? Vice Mayor Risto on the consent items. Vice Mayor Risto.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't have any comments. I was going to make a
Go ahead and
motion.
make a motion then.
Okay, then I move to approve items 1 through 15 from the consent calendar.
Do I have a second? I have a second from Councilmember Sack.
Yes.
So I will go ahead and call the question if there's no further comments. Vice Mayor Risto,
Aye.
Councilmember Badami,
Aye.
Councilmember Sack,
Aye.
Councilmember Hudis.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so passes unanimously for our consent calendar items 1 through 15. That brings us to verbal communications, and this is for an opportunity for the public to speak on items that are not on tonight's agenda, and you have 3 minutes. So raise your virtual hand if you would like to speak on items not on tonight's agenda. Don't see any hands, so I'll close verbal communications and we will go to our public hearings. First up is item number 16, which is our weed abatement program. And who am I turning that over to?
Hi, good evening.
Hi.
Good evening, Mayor, Vice Mayor, and council members. I'm Meredith Johnson, Administrative Technician with the Parks and Public Works Department. I want to begin my introduction of this item by stating that due to high fire risks, the town takes abatement requirements very seriously to make sure property owners meet their obligations. The town also provides vegetation management to ensure the safety of the community, especially along the roadways. The need to protect the entire community means there's little room for expectations to weed abatement program. The item before you tonight includes 2 recommended actions. Conduct a public hearing to consider objections to the proposed assessment reports and charges, and adopt a resolution confirming the report and authorizing collection of the assessment charges. The charges on the list reflect a few types of fees. First, all parcels that are in the program will be assessed $91, even if they complied with the abating of the weeds this year. That's because once a property is placed in the program, they will be in it until they are compliant for 3 years. And at that point, they are removed. The fee is for the first inspection of the year and for the monitoring of the properties. Any additional fees beyond $91 listed are certain parcels with additional fees. Those can vary from additional inspections, administrative, and abatement fees as described in the staff report. That concludes my report, and I'm happy to answer any questions along with Brenda Petroni from the County Weed Abatement Program.
All right, thank you for your report. Would any council members wish to ask questions before I go to the public? I don't see any hands, so I'll go ahead and open public comment and start with Lee Katana. Hi, Lee, we can see you, but you're still muted. There you go, unmuted.
Okay, I actually raised my hand to make a comment during public communications, not during this item.
Okay, we'll go ahead and make it now. I can take it now.
Okay, I would like to request that the council reconsider the approval of the general plan 2040 that was made on June 30th. And these are my reasons. It's very confusing. Excuse me, I'm going to just take a minute. I'm sort of nervous here. Reading what was done, it to me seems very confusing. We've now eliminated medium density. However, we still have a 5 to 12 units per acre density within the fire hazard zone within the downtown area. I want to talk specifically about the downtown area, and I'm going to break it into two different sections, below Highway 9 and above Highway 9. Putting aside the low density designation changes, that's fine. But within the fire hazard area, the zoning code is for single family residential downtown. That used to be 5 to 12. We're maintaining that within the fire hazard area according to the amendments. And also we're retaining that within the historic district that's within the fire hazards area. However, all the other residential area below Highway 9, west of Glen Ridge, is all zoned as medium density. I mean, it's a general plan designation of medium density, it was, which is 5 to 12. That also includes a historic preservation district, which is now being bumped up to 14 to 22. This doesn't make any sense to me. I don't understand how it can be implemented through the zoning code without huge changes. And it seems to me that there are easier ways to accomplish what was being aimed at. The same thing for the area above Highway 9 to the west of Santa Cruz. That area is all now medium density, 5 to 12 with an R1D designation. R1D is a single family zoning. Now we're changing it to a designation that's 14 to 22. I'm not sure how that fits into a residential zoning. Also, that has implications for SB9 because SB9 applies to all zoning areas or general plan designations that are primarily single family zoning, and R1D is, and our past medium density was. So those are some of the reasons that I have concerns. There are a lot more, but I know I don't have the time, so I will stop.
So Ms. Quintana, I do have a question from Councilmember Huda. So this is verbal communications that I'm taking a verbal communication versus an agenda items that's not on the agenda. So we don't want to discuss the item, but go ahead with a question.
Thank you. Since there's a possibility that the general plan may be reconsidered in some way or another, would you be willing to send in your comments in a note, just really the ones that you covered in your verbal communications?
Actually, my understanding is that you have up until the first council meeting to ask for reconsideration of a vote. And that's what I'm asking, because while I think there are some things that might need to be modified in the general plan, not just the designations that were added to, but some additional clarification of intention and more detail. I am not in favor of putting that off to a referendum. I think that based on transparency, efficiency, and clarity, it just makes much more sense to approve the general plan and the housing element concurrently, so that there doesn't have to be extra general plan amendments made in case and we already know the housing element is going to require some modifications to the approved general plan. So I just think it's a much more efficient, clean process.
Yeah. I understand it, but in case things move quickly, are you willing to put the suggestions that you had into writing, the ones that you just spoke about?
I don't understand. Let me ask this question. I would be willing to put them into writing, but I'm not clear what the effect of that if there is no reconsideration of the approval. If council does not ask to have a reconsideration of the approval, what would be the purpose of me putting it in writing?
Well, it's your option, and I don't want to get into discussing the options that are in front of the council now. So my comment was strictly about the comments that you made tonight. Thank you.
Councilmember Badami, question?
Yes, Ms. Quintana, you're suggesting a reconsideration of a vote of the general plan. So are your issues with a vote having to do with the upzoning, or is it the goals and policies, or is it both?
It's actually both. For one thing, I'm confused about this concept of upzoning because we have the general plan categories. At this point, I don't know how those changes are going to be reflected within the zoning code itself, whether there will actually be changes in the zoning code as to the minimum standards for lot size, which would affect density, or whether other things would be changed. It's pretty unclear. What's the rest of your question?
For now, thank you.
Policies. Okay, yes. Can I answer that one?
Yes, you may.
Okay. In the introduction, under how to use the general plan or how to read the general plan, it defines goals as broadly based, and then it defines policies as specific actions which will lead to the implementation of the actual goal. But in table 3, point 1 or 2, I forget which, no, it's in the introduction, 1.3, I think. It states that a policy is a specific, unambiguous direction. All throughout the general plan GPAC hearings, we kept being told to keep the policies general.
Okay, so I think I need to cut it off here. We're getting way into kind of discussing this, which is not an agenda item. So I'm going to.
So I guess I'm asking you to put the reconsideration on the agenda. Is that the right way to do it?
We got your ask. Thank you. So I will close verbal communications for the items not on the agenda again, and go back to the agenda item that we were on, which is item number 16, weed abatement, and whether there are any members of the public which wish to speak or contest their charges for the weed abatement. And I don't see any further hands, so I will close public comment on that item and come back to council for questions or a motion. Vice Mayor Risto.
Thank you. I do have a question for staff, which I'm assuming because there's nothing attached to our report, the answer is no, but did anybody in writing register a complaint or not want to comply? Or do we have any objections that we received in advance of this meeting?
We had some miscommunication, and so there was 3 that I worked with the county before the staff report was uploaded. Everything got resolved before then, so no other members of the public contested.
Okay, excellent. Thank you.
You're welcome.
Councilmember Badami.
With that, I'm prepared to make a motion then. I move to adopt a resolution in attachment 2 confirming the 2022 weed abatement program assessment report and authorizing collection of the assessment charges.
Councilmember Hudes.
I'll second the motion.
Okay, I have a motion and a second. Any further discussion from council? I don't see any. I'll call the question. Councilmember Badami.
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto.
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye. It passes unanimously. And we move on to item 17, which is approve revisions as recommended by the policy committee to the town council policy 2-1 commission appointments.
Thank you, Mayor. I'll be giving the report this evening. The policy committee did consider some modifications to our commission appointment policy The concept was how we could give an opportunity for all council members to ask questions of our applicants during the process. Attachment 1 has the proposed language on page 4 to clarify our intent, that it is the intent of the policy to give all council members an equal opportunity to ask one question. And in the conversation, we discussed that if each council member were to ask a question, this would most likely expand the time limits of each interview, which could then affect the overall interview process. And as the committee continued to discuss that, it really debated how much of that should be legislated in the policy versus just some general guidelines in the policy, and then let the mayor provide the specific guidance during the interviews. So you have several alternatives before you, depending upon how much specificity you feel the policy needs to have. So option 1 is the bare bones, give everybody an opportunity to ask a question. Option number 2 would specify that each interview would be approximately 5 minutes, so the applicants would know that in advance. Option 3 is to remain silent on the length of time of each interview, so you have more flexibility. Option 4 is to set a specific time for the interviews, similar to what we do for our youth commission, and the proposal is to set a time of 4 p.m. so that way all applicants would be able to know in advance what to schedule. And then the last option is to specify that each interview will be a minimum of 5 minutes, and then the council would choose whether or not you would like to set a maximum time limit. So there's a lot of choices before you. The committee had a very robust discussion. We prepared policies for each of those options to give you the full spectrum of the choices before you. Staff is very flexible. We're happy to support the council any way it would like to go. And I defer to the chair of our policy committee to perhaps add more flavor to the discussion and conversation. Thank you.
Okay, and maybe I thought maybe I would just add a little bit. We have 3 new council members, but the way we used to do it many years ago, while I was still on council, it was less structured, and instead of having a pre-list of questions, basically we just whoever wanted to ask a question kind of raised their hands, and with the less structure, I thought it worked okay also. Usually 1 or 2 people ask questions, but nobody felt like they had to ask a question. So just wanted to give a little bit of history. I think some of you probably went through those as commission members then, but over time we've added more structure with more prepared questions, and it's kind of it's evolving to something different, and maybe we want to go back. Does any council members wish to ask questions before I go to the public on this? I don't see any, so let me open the public comment on this item. Would any member of the public wish to address us on this item 17? I don't see any hands raised, so I'll close the public comment and come back to council. Vice Mayor Aristo.
Thank you. I actually have quite a few thoughts about this, but I actually want to hear from the chair of the committee because I wasn't able to, attend or hear the meeting. I would like to hear more about the discussion before I weigh in.
Well, that's me, the chair, everybody. I actually kind of liked what the mayor stated. I liked it when it was less structured and it was more of a free-for-all as to what questions we wanted to ask rather than these structured questions that just seem rather mundane and really didn't allow us to get to the point of what we might want to ask of the uniqueness of a particular applicant. And I do feel it's important that each council member in recognition of equity that we strive for has an opportunity to ask a question of the applicant. And I also believe that some of us are conscientious of our time and that there may not be a need to ask a question. So my concern here is that every council member has an opportunity to ask the applicant a question, and one that's not necessarily structured and given to them. And that was changed about a year ago. I like the less structured approach. And restricting it to a certain amount of time, I don't like the time limits either, because you might need to dive a little deeper with a particular applicant. So that's how the discussion went. When I look at these options that are given to us, I'm inclined for number 2 and number 3, a combination, but not setting a time limit with the allowance that each council member has an opportunity to ask the applicant a question.
Okay, thank you for that update. Vice Mayor Risto, did you want to go with your comments next, I guess?
Yeah, if that's okay. So, I've been on the council side of interviewing, and but for many, many more times, I've been on the other side of not only being interviewed for boards and committees, but I would sit and watch all of the selection process every single year. So a couple of observations. One is, I think, especially for the public, if they're watching it and they have not gone through the application process, what they probably don't know is the application contains the bulk of the questions. So for example, when I'm making my decision as a council member, I already have a pretty good idea just from the application, which are the strongest candidates and who would be the best fit. And then I sort of view the interview process as an opportunity for a candidate to bring forward perhaps more information or things that they didn't cover in their application and kind of flesh things out. I have mixed feelings about whether it can be any council member asking any question, because I've certainly at least watched interviews where somebody makes a comment like, oh, you have a Cal hat on, my daughter went to so-and-so, and they're like throwaway questions, or it feels like an old boys club, or I don't know what. So I feel like that kind of takes away from the professionalism and the fairness of the interview. I've also witnessed council members asking select questions of some members, but not of all of them. And those questions were already on the application form. So it almost felt like an emphasis. So I actually felt like there was good reason to go to kind of standardized questions, because at least then, we have a chance to refine those questions every year, but it's an opportunity to make sure that each candidate is actually getting meaningful questions. The other thing that's difficult on our side of things is some candidates will answer with a 3-word sentence, and others will give an incredibly robust, rich answer that also may cover, may also answer the next 2 unasked questions, because there are people that will explain themselves very thoroughly. So I don't know what the right answer is. Honestly, if we have a good set of questions and I'm in the room, I don't ever need to ask the question. Everybody else can ask the questions, because I think, we're all hearing the same answers. I don't need to hear my voice. So with that, I'll stop talking for the moment.
Councilmember Hudes?
Thanks. I'm probably one who feels that council members are, there's an obligation for council members to engage in this process, and that council members shouldn't be precluded from asking a question. And so I do like the idea of the time so that a council member can ask at least one question. And in the case, and I've noticed in the last couple of rounds where many council members asked questions that were not part of the scripted questions because of the unique qualifications or experience of an applicant, and also to not be repetitive to what's on the application that we've all read. So I actually think there is value in the statement in the policy that says that council members in no case shall council members be precluded from asking a relevant question? And that leaves open the possibility of deviating from the script. I understand the goal of equity with the standardized questions. And so the combination of both leads to needing a little extra time. And that's what I was contemplating is it worth the time of our applicants and of the council and of staff to allow that? And on that, I come down pretty strongly on yes. The people who we are appointing are making a significant commitment of their time over the next 4 years. And to add another minute or two to their interview process, thereby maybe making the interview process have to start earlier, I think it's worth it because these folks are really contributing quite a lot. So I actually liked option 4, which didn't specify a time limit for the questions. I believe it gives the council members the opportunity to ask at least, or to ask one question if they want to. Doesn't require that each council member ask a question, which I don't think is necessary. And by starting at 4, we would not be under the time constraint, I don't believe, in any case. I'm sure there might be a time when we don't need all that time, where we have fewer positions or fewer applicants. And it just means we'd have a longer break before the council meeting would start. So I think that 4 actually gives us the flexibility. Maybe I've read it wrong, but that's what I was thinking in looking at the 4 options that were before us.
And I would just respond quickly and say the 4 concerns me a little bit. Always having to start at 4 o'clock. I mean, what if we have 6 candidates or 8 candidates to interview, and we're talking about cutting into people's work days also. So as a mayor, I would, I try to look and say, okay, I want to inconvenience our council members, some of which may be working, and the people that are interviewing the least, inconvenience them the least as I can when I do the scheduling. And I'm concerned that a 4 o'clock will always, run into inconveniencing people when we don't need it to. So my thoughts on that. I'll go to Councilmember Badami.
Okay, so I think we might be getting confused with Mayor Rennie. You said you don't like the set time of 4, but I thought you were referring to option number 4 that Councilmember Hudes said that he was preferring, where each interview will be a minimum of 5 minutes. So the minimum of 5 minutes concerns me, because what if we run out of things to say and we don't take up those whole 5 minutes? Do we just sit there in silence for those extra 2? That's just a comment I have. In regards to the non-scripted questions, I think it's important that we have that opportunity. And I know some of the questions, might seem silly. Vice Mayor mentioned the Cal hat, but I like to think some of us council members, we have some empathy when it comes to some of the anxiety that some of these applicants must have. They're brave enough to come forward, and maybe they're great applicants, but maybe they don't interview well. They're afraid of the public speaking, or just, nerves and anxiety set in. So for me, asking a question like that might just put somebody at ease and make them feel more comfortable. So that's just a comment I have on that. So again, I'm kind of open to these options, but again, I kind of like the idea between option number 2 and number 3. But I'm open. That's why we brought it forward for the whole council to discuss and come up with the best decision that works for all of us. Thank you.
And I agree with what Councilmember Badami said on both parts. I think they're put people at ease questions. I know I've done those on purpose sometimes to make somebody feel comfortable with us. I mean, when you interview somebody for a job, you do the same thing. You want to start off building a little rapport or something. Vice Mayor Risto, I think you're next.
Thank you. Yeah, Yeah, of course. We always ice break and we introduce ourselves and we're friendly. I'm fine with that. I am concerned about having it put in the policy of starting at 4 p.m. I mean, the option that says that doesn't make sense to me because there's certainly going to be recruitments where we might only have 7 candidates and maybe none of them can make it at 4 o'clock. You know, when we have the large fall recruitments and if we have 28 applicants, then our clerk can do the shuffle and those who can't make it at 4 can go at 6. But I don't like being frozen into a starting time. And I think whether it's in the policy or not, we should generally strive for about 5 minutes, which is usually enough. But yeah, I also don't like cutting somebody off when they're finishing something or they start to answer a question and there would be a great follow on. And it's like, oh, that's enough time. So I'm having trouble finding which option works the best for me, but I definitely would not want to specify that our interviews start at 4 p.m.
And I think part of it could be in the scheduling, right? You know, as mayor, when it's been scheduled so that, let's say, each candidate has 3 minutes, and if I let anybody go over 3 minutes, we now run into our start council time kind of thing. So if you schedule whatever the amount of time it is, but you know you have some extra slop in there, then you can let certain discussions go beyond the 3 minutes. You can be a little more flexible about it. Somebody might say, well, that's not fair. They got to talk for 4 minutes. Well, this other candidate only got to talk for 3 minutes, but I think it's impossible to be consider everything. Councilmember Hudish, you had your hand up from before, but I assume you want some more. So let me go back to you.
Okay, thanks. Yeah, responding to Councilmember Badami, I was not advocating for a minimum of 5 minutes. I don't think that would be wise. That's, I believe, in the staff report, that is option 5. I had been talking about option 4. I've been talked out of that, but I do think that probably option 3, which is silent on the length of each interview, but with the understanding that the clerk and the mayor working together would allow roughly 5 minutes so that, and that would then, you know, if we have a heavy night with a ton of applicants for the Planning Commission and the Finance Commission, we will have enough time to do that. So I don't, you know, I agree. Let's take the start time out and leave that to the judgment. But it seems like option 3, attachment 3, would come closest to that. I'd be prepared to make a motion.
Let's see what Councilmember Sayak says. We haven't given her an opportunity to speak on this item yet.
Actually, if Councilmember Hudish is prepared to make a motion, I'll second it. I'm also in favor of option 3, simply because after 8 years, it seems like this is the one policy that we revise almost annually. And frankly, there is no good option because we all want to get to know every single candidate that applies. And I always think we just run out of time. And how do you respect someone who puts themselves out there, but understand that on a given night, we may have at least a dozen candidates that are applying for various events. So I like the option of remaining silent and then asking the mayor to work with the clerk on how best to provide equity, to understand people's concern that particular night based on the number of candidates. So Councilmember Hudish, if you're willing to make that motion, I'll second it.
Okay, so I move to adopt attachment 3, option 3, as redlined.
And I'll second the motion.
And so Councilmember Badami, does that fit what you were interested in before, or did you want to ask for any modifications?
No, I'll be supporting the motion.
Okay. If there's no other discussion, then I will call the question. Councilmember Hudish.
Aye.
Councilmember Sack,
Aye.
Councilmember Badami,
Aye.
Vice Mayor Risto,
Aye.
and the mayor will vote aye. So that item passes unanimously. And we will move on to our last agenda item 18, which is adopting a resolution, potentially adopting a resolution to submitting to the qualified electors of the town at the November 8th, 2022 for a consolidated general election, on and on and on about our business license modifications.
Good evening, Mayor and Town Council. So tonight is a continuation of the deliberations that Council and your Finance Commission have had regarding whether or not to modernize the existing business license program. On June 21st, the last time Council discussed this item, you directed staff to spend the summer doing outreach to businesses and also continue analysis of the different concepts that could be used to modernize the license and to come back to Council today with those results. As you can see in the staff report, we did move immediately to initiate business outreach. This included everything from creating a web page to starting to promote a community meeting on social media, to sending out over 5,000 postcards to every business we had a registered license for, whether they were still an active business or not, just to try and cast a very wide net to invite them to the community meeting, inform them that this discussion is happening, and also let them know that they can find additional information on the webpage. We also created a very specific email address, and that email address did receive some communications from businesses, which are also in your packet tonight. So in terms of the analysis of models, what staff tried to do was take 3 concepts that could be utilized to modernize the business license program. Model 1 is a concept that just takes every existing fee and increases it by a percentage. In Model 1, which was in the HDL report, that percentage was increased 20%. When the Finance Committee met, they presented an alternative model, which is almost identical to Model 1, although they advocated for 100%. And then they added some additional tiers on the retailing gross receipts table. When you look at Model 2, which is basically eliminating the existing system and going to a straight across the board gross receipts model for every business in town, that is another way that it could have been approached. And then Model 3, which in your report said staff was recommending, is a model where we moved a portion of one of the existing gross receipts tables to try and move a little bit more towards an equitable distribution. You'll recall that one of the things that was identified in the HDL report was that our current system is slightly regressive and that smaller businesses end up paying a slightly higher effective tax rate than larger businesses. So that being said, these models weren't necessarily intended to be the only options that Council can consider. And in a desk item today, you'll see that this mission started to try and address a couple issues. One was that the HDL report said that we have a current regressive structure. One is the fact that nothing's been done for 30 years. And so there's been no escalation in fees to try and capture inflation for the past 30 years. And then the other was along the way, if there are ways to simplify the model for both internal staff administratively, but then also for the reporting businesses that we engage with for the program. And so staff feels that while the models are helpful, as I mentioned, you can utilize components of the models to construct other models similar to what the Finance Commission did. And I'll also add that yesterday I concluded my final conversation with Netflix. We did speak with them on 3 occasions, a very constructive conversation. And at the meeting yesterday, and that is also in the desk item, they are comfortable with me representing their position on our business tax proposals. In addition, I've had conversations with the chamber and spoke with several of their board members at that meeting as well. With that, you have your team here that's been working on this. That includes the town attorney, that includes Holly Young in the town manager's office. And we also have the HDL representative, who I am going to promote to panelist right now. And so all of us are available to facilitate your questions. We do have an Excel spreadsheet available, which if council members wanted to see what different iterations might look like. We were able to do that in real time, just so you can appreciate what it might do for certain fees. You know, this is similar to what staff has been doing, is just trying to see, you know, what would incremental changes do. I will say most of the feedback from the business community is they understand why we're having this conversation. They want to do something that will not be too drastic. They prefer things that would be incremental in nature. And most obviously prefer that they be the ones that are less impacted. But in general, the conversations and the communications, I would say, were very, very constructive. And I have yet to receive, you know, what is just an outright no, except for one communication.
Okay, looks like we have several questions before we start with public comment. So I'm going to go with Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. So I attended the Finance Commission meeting, and there was a discussion that centered around the statistics comparison study of the municipalities around us. And it's most likely that we're not collecting business tax license fees from a significant number of businesses in Los Gatos. So what can we do to step up enforcement of that?
So thank you for the question, and you're correct. So a year ago, there were two items that came before the Finance Commission first. One was an item about business license modernization, which we're discussing now. And then the other item was around what they referred to as a business license amnesty program. And typically an amnesty program is done to try and identify businesses that may or may not be paying their license. And so at the Finance Commission, one of the commissioners did take data from the HDL table, and he looked at Los Gatos and said, okay, roughly 30,000 residents. We have about 2,400 businesses that are paying licenses. And when you looked at that relative to other communities, Los Altos is one at about 30,000 residents, also 3,800 businesses. He also looked at Saratoga, about 30,000 residents, 3,700 businesses. So the thesis was, because we have less, we might have underreporting. And so without doing further analysis, I don't know exactly what the extent of underreporting could be, but I will say at my time in San Jose, when they would do an amnesty program, it typically yielded results. And so the thought was move forward with modernization first, and then at some point come back to council with a report that would basically recommend also moving forward with an amnesty program.
Thank you, Mr. Andrews.
Councilmember Hudes.
Thank you. I know I would like to hear from the public, but I did have one question about the staff report. I don't know to what degree you can discuss, but we did have a letter from Netflix regarding option 3. And is it possible to share the figures of what Netflix is currently paying, what they would pay in option 3, and then what they would pay under their proposal to track with inflation?
And council member, I'm loath to start a conversation by saying no to a council member, but I'm afraid I can't do exactly what you're asking. But what I can do is put things in a context where you'll be able to discern pretty much what we're discussing. So in model 3, if we were going to use basically a 300% increase, which going from $75 to the recommended 300 is a 300% increase, we said that would yield approximately about another 1.2 million. So we're looking at roughly 400,000 per 100% increase. It's fair to say that Netflix is by far the largest entity in town. So it's fair to say that they would shoulder the majority of that. And so in my conversation yesterday, they pretty much said they were neutral on model 1. They said they were a definite no to an across-the-board gross receipts model, and I can go into why they shared that if the council would like. And then on model 3, they shared that because it was only addressing a single gross receipts table, it did feel a little like they were being singled out, and they appreciate why the council is having the conversation, and they appreciate that we're trying to do it in a thoughtful way. But they thought Model 3 that was closer to the inflation identified in the staff report at 117% made more sense to them. And as I said, I can provide a little more color to our conversations if council would like, but that's basically the short version.
Thank you. That's helpful.
Vice Mayor?
Thank you. I probably should have asked this earlier, before the meeting, but I know that we do not receive sales tax from Netflix because sales tax didn't anticipate streaming. Is that completely correct? And I know that it was, asymptotically approaching 0 years ago. So
It's partially correct, council member. So when Netflix was predominantly putting DVDs in the mail, that was taxable under our sales tax structure. When they moved to a streaming service, that was not. That being said, they actually still have a DVD division.
okay.
It has been declining, as you can imagine, but there was a recent article about that division that said, as long as there are folks in remote areas of the country with very poor internet service, they will probably still maintain somewhat of a DVD business. Now, that being said, it's a glimmer of what we used to collect compared to the original DVD only model versus what we have now, which is a residual business entity that does still maintain a DVD unit.
Okay, thank you.
Okay, let's open the public comment. And first up, we have Janet and Grandma. So am I going to get Janet or Grandma or both?
Hi, you're just getting Janet. I was setting up Grandma's computer.
Okay, well, we'll make do with just you.
Okay, thank you. My name is Janet DeShiel. I'm with Black Cat Hats in Los Gatos on North Santa Cruz. The first I heard of any of this was from the Mercury News this weekend. So this is all new to me. Nobody has reached out to us. We haven't received any kind of mail notification, any notification. So I have some questions that I would like to pose. From the article I read, that 10 million is representing the shortfall for the next 5 years. And I'm interested to know how much of that shortfall the town expects the businesses to pay for, because that would affect which choice I would think we would go through on choosing. I think the first choice is just nothing. The second choice, depending on how much money, I could see doing that. But I think what I want to know is who else is paying into this shortfall. Kind of reminds me of the biblical story of the widow's mite, where the widow with nothing contributes all she has, and the people with extra wealth put in a little bit, and maybe they're bigger dollars. But right now, the small businesses, the small retailers, we are hurting. And to your benefit, believe it or not, our gross receipts are going to be higher this year. Well, because obviously the last few years, but we're having really good gross receipts. But the flip side of that is our cost of goods has gone up so much that our margins are much smaller this year. We're paying more to our employees this year because it's the right thing to do with inflation. But the other thing I thought was a little disingenuous is saying, hey, we haven't raised this or changed the fees in 30 years. Yes, but we've had inflation, meaning people have paid more, or we've become better businesses and more has gone to the town because of that. So if it is 10 million, we're trying to make up through the retailers and the small businesses, then it looks like our option is the third option, because doesn't look like the others would even get there. But I would also like to say that I don't like the regressive tax, but I would be willing to pay more per year too. But don't put me out of business. You know, I just got we just got our personal property tax bill. You know, we've got $11,000 in personal property and it's probably not even worth that. And I forget, it's like $600-700. It's like
Okay,
every year
Janet,
for,
thank you.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Time's up.
Sorry about
All right, thank you. Let me go next to Catherine Summers.
Good evening. I'm Catherine Summers with the Chamber of Commerce. Thanks, Janet, for speaking out. She's actually Black Cat Hats is one of our members. So I am always looking out for all of our members. And I think she stated some of her concerns really eloquently. I do actually think that Arn and the staff has done a commendable job on outreach. I apologize that because it was kind of a crazy month, the chamber probably should have had a few merchant meetings and we weren't able to. So I still would love to perhaps talk with, have the opportunity to talk with more of our members. That said, following this pretty closely and meeting with Arn and meeting with my board, I have also reached out to other members of the chamber and other businesses. And I think there's a few things to think about. First of all, when we first proposed it, the idea of modernization of the business license and a tax, perhaps, my board really balked at the fact that they did not want to be taxed on the success of their business. So I think that's something to kind of think about. All people that I've spoken to do understand the fact that we have not changed the flat rate since 1991. And would, as Janet even said, consider maybe incrementally increasing that, but not so much that it really hurts the business. So I don't know if that looks like maybe incrementally it goes up 10% per year in order to meet the 117% that we are behind in inflation, or however that works out economically. But I just don't think you can slap that on everybody all at once. I think most people with whom I've talked really do appreciate the hybrid model of some sort. So you have the flat tax and then you as well have something that with the gross receipts, can be factored in. I don't exactly know what that looks like. I did not agree. As you can tell, we do agree really with what Arn and the staff is kind of proposing and supporting. I think the Finance Commission was a little aggressive in thinking that you can all of a sudden increase everything by 300% or whatever. I think what they recommended was a little aggressive. I do also feel that to be equitable, I don't think you can only in option number 3, I don't think you can only penalize in a way the top 5 companies in Los Gatos. I think the burden has to be spread across all businesses. And I think we can make that argument so long as it is done fairly, equitably, and conservatively. Thanks.
You do have a question, Ms. Summers, from Mr. Hudis, it looks like.
Yeah, thank you. And thanks for your thoughts. And I have some ideas about how we might adopt a hybrid that addresses some of the things we've raised. I was interested in your comment about the 5 companies that are in this category called e-commerce, manufacturing, wholesaling, et cetera, where there would be a gross receipts tax and an increase in the gross receipts tax. Have you spoken with any of them? And I don't know whether any of them are members of the chamber, but I wonder if you've had any conversations with them, because in option 3, they alone would have a change.
Correct. They alone would have a change. I have not, I have a decent relationship with a few people at Netflix. Again, as we all know, they're pretty hard to get into that vault. I think Arn has done an amazing job of really reaching out, and they came to the table and really, I think we need to value their opinion because they are a part of our community. And I think working with them, as Arn is doing, will go a long way in the long run. So I have not had a specific conversation with them, though, no, and nor with the other 4 businesses that would be affected. I just think in general, I think that's an unfair practice to try to impose.
Thank you.
Okay, I don't see any other hands. Oh, Mr. Andrews, I guess you wanted to add in here?
If it's okay, Mayor and Council. So
Sure.
I do think the one speaker raised a good point. So starting back in 2016, the council and the staff and the community at that time, we've been taking pretty measured incremental approaches towards revenue generation. So in 2016, the council and the community agreed to raise the TOT from 10% to 12%. So that was additional revenue generation, and it was done in a way that doesn't necessarily affect our community directly. You know, it's a tax on visitors that decide to stay at a hotel in our town. In 2018, we took our next step towards revenue generation when the council and the community decided to move forward with the district sales tax. The sales tax, the analysis at the time said that, sure, while some of the residents might pay that additional sales tax, a lot of it actually comes from outside the community. So once again, it was kind of an incremental approach and trying to not overly burden, you know, the residents or the businesses in town. In 2019, staff came forward and council adopted the annexations, which was really a revenue diversion. It was $1 million in revenue that had been going to the county that rightfully belonged staying in the town. And so that annexation was a way of capturing $1 million without impacting anyone in the community. And so we're before you now trying to see if there's a measured way to now ask the businesses to pay a little more. And we've said this before in a public forum. In 2024, we will probably need to come forward and ask the residents of the community if they can also add a little bit to work on our budget with us. And so staff is, as I mentioned, even though we put a recommendation on Model 3, we are definitely willing to facilitate any measure that tries to address a couple things, capture a little bit of the inflation we've lost, see if there's a way to help a little bit with the equity distribution. We just heard from a small business in town, you know, they don't want to be overly burdened and they think equity resonates in terms of, you know, seeing if everybody can chip in a little. And that's really what we're attempting to do here.
All right, thank you. Would any other members of the public wish to speak to us on this item? I'm not seeing any other hands, so I'll close public comment and come back to council now for more questions, discussions, proposals, motions. Councilmember Hudes?
Yeah, just a foundational question. Is there any way to increase the business tax revenue without pursuing a ballot measure?
I'm going to answer the question in two parts. There would be if we did an amnesty program that actually all the items that have been under discussion for the past year, all of them will require a ballot measure. Anything that touches an existing dollar amount in the town's 1991 ordinance has to go before the voters as a ballot measure. There can make minor language tweaks, you can make administrative tweaks, that can be done without a ballot measure, but once we touch a dollar amount in the state of California under Prop 218, that has to be a ballot measure.
Thank you. And I do have a follow-up. So, you know, the challenge is that twofold. We have not changed our taxes on the flat rate parts of our businesses since 1991. So for good reason, some of those may not really be paying a fair share at this point. On the other hand, we have a hybrid model that relative to other communities is yielding a pretty good business tax return overall. We're coming out, you know, you could look at it maybe number 2 or number 3 with the peer group. So I wouldn't be in favor of doubling, which is what I believe option 2 does, is it actually triples the business tax revenue by adding 2.6 million. So I think we have to kind of start with what problem are we trying to solve? And in my mind, it's 3 parts. One is to partially close the structural budget deficit gap that we have of about 2 million. And so it does seem to me that trying to achieve about 1 million would be a reasonable approach for addressing the business part of it. The second thing is that I think we're also trying to address equity in a way of not having such a regressive tax function. And then the third thing is, since it has been since 1991, we're looking for some way of this to be self-sustaining, so we don't have to put a budget initiative every couple of years, particularly if we're in an inflationary time. So I wanted to ask a question about Model 3 and whether it would be possible to reduce the gross receipts for this group of e-commerce manufacturing businesses with gross receipts above 12 million, to reduce that amount somewhat, to revise the flat fee portion, which is untouched in option 3, to look more like the attempt of the Finance Commission, and maybe increase that by, let's just say, 30% for the remaining businesses, and implement a CPI index on that so that those flat rates could be adjusted according to inflation, which could continue to be an issue for us. And do that to achieve about 1 to 1.2 million in total. And that seems to address some of the points that were raised by some of our speakers, some of the flat tax payers who might be willing to pay more, but not necessarily the 100% that was recommended by the Finance Commission. At the same time, make an adjustment to the gross receipts group that isn't quite as extreme as what is in option 3 right now. So I don't know the levers to pull to get there, but I'm asking the question, is it possible to structure Model 3 in such a way as to achieve those?
Thank you, Councilmember. And the answer is yes. And so to your point, back in 1991, whoever that council was, they were a fairly thoughtful council, because having gross receipts, at least a portion of our ordinance since 1991, was very progressive for the time. So we have the existing tables, and so it's a fairly easy exercise. The Finance Commission, they said 100%. So all we do is take the existing table and increase it by 100%. If you wanted to increase it by 1.25, 125%, we can run those too. And at some point, if folks would like me to put them up on the screen, I can show it. And so the same is also true for the flat tax. So currently, the Finance Commission was the only alternative model other than Model 1 that touched the flat tax. Model 1 looked at raising it 20%, and you can see what those numbers are. And then you can imagine they're just doubled under the Finance Commission. But you could also change that, and here, why don't I do a quick screen share just so folks can get an appreciation of, how we do the modeling. Does everyone see the screen?
Yeah, yes, we see it.
Okay, so basically, this is the model that was put together in the event the council wanted to consider the alternative model put forward by the Finance Commission. And so basically, you can see everything's a double. If it was $420 here for advertising signs in column 3, it was $840. But let's say this evening the council says, you know what, we think that's a little aggressive for those businesses. So let's consider doing something, you know, a little more incremental and not quite 100% at once. And so as staff, let's go ahead and see what it would look like at 140%. 1.4, you now see it goes from 420 to 588. I drop the new calculation down the column, and you can see what that meant now, at least for this part of the flat taxpayers. So once again, you can see, you know, amusement, more than 2,000 seating capacity the first day. The existing is 630. If you increase that 140%, it's 882 instead of doubling it and making it 1,260. And so we can also do a similar one. So this is the retailing gross receipts. We have two gross receipts tables in our ordinance. One is retailing, which the speaker who owns the Cat's Hats would fall under. And then the other one is the gross receipts we refer to as e-commerce, manufacturing, wholesaling, and jobbing. So let's say under this current model, which is the finance model, they wanted to double everything. Once again, let's say you wanted to take a more incremental approach. You only want to raise it 50%. So you can see now, instead of this being doubled, it's now only $169. We do it for the entire column. And so you can see the current at about 2 million, instead of it being, sorry, 4 million in this, they doubled that. Instead of it being 975, it goes up about $500 to $1,400. I will say, while we're on this model, the Finance Commission created 2 additional tiers. Staff in good conscience can't recommend that if council wants to consider it, just because I did not do any business outreach that would have contemplated adding 2 additional tiers. And so from a staff perspective, this evening, if you were to orient towards that, we would say fine, but not with those 2 additional tiers, unless you want staff to go do more additional outreach, because this was never discussed. And then similar to the other gross receipts table, this is the one that is in Model 3. Model 3 had it going up 300%, and those numbers are in your staff report and in the resolution. And then here's the model from the Finance Commission alternative, which once again, it basically changes that figure after 12 million from $75 to 150. It increases it 100%. And you can see somebody who is currently making between 11,500,000 and 12 million is paying about $4,800, and with 100% increase, it doubles it to about 9,600. As the staff report mentioned, there's really only 5 businesses in our town that go above that, and as we've discussed, Netflix is primarily the largest entity in that group, and we've had 3 conversations with them about this proposal. Did that help at all, trying to envision the types of levers that can be used? You know, you could do a small increment on flat tax and then add a little something to the retailing gross receipts. You could dial back Model 3, where staff had suggested a 300% increase, to something closer to what the Finance Commission did. And I'll add another point, which was in prior memos, but it's a good thing to reiterate. So gross receipts is about 25% of the taxes we receive. So the other 75% is from the Model 1 folks, the flat fee folks. And you'll even notice that the model, when you look at the stack bar chart, you start to see how changing gross receipts starts to impact those other groups more than if you were to look at like a Model 3 or something like that.
That's helpful. And it does start to explain, because I think we have 2 things going on here. Number one, we have sort of a tax policy consideration about whether we want to move toward a less regressive and a more progressive, more equitable function, and whether we want to keep pace with inflation or come back to doing this more frequently. And then on the other side, there's a rate or a total amount issue. And so that's why I was gravitating toward Model 3, but also adding in an increase for the flat rate as well. So it would be, again, more of an increase in our hybrid situation to make up partially. So I have sort of a rough proposal, but just from a policy and perspective, I do think that it's valuable to try to achieve some of those objectives. So, but the reason I asked the question that way was that it did seem to me that maybe we could decrease or reduce the gross receipts increase that's proposed in Model 3 and increase the flat rate by about 30 to 40%. Let's just say 30. And then apply a CPI factor to it on an ongoing basis. And for this year to try to achieve about a $1 to $1.2 million increase in business tax as a result of doing that. Would that get us? Is there a way to get us there? And is the 30% and what is the percentage on the gross receipts that would get us to about a 1 to 1.2 million?
And so to your question, so originally Model 1 at 10% is expected to yield about an additional 255,000. So you can add another 10% increment to that roughly. So if you went to 30% on flat, you're probably somewhere in the 325 range in terms of anticipated additional revenues. The staff recommendation we discussed earlier at 300% is expected to yield about 1.2 million. So that's about 400,000 every increment of 100,000. So if you brought it back to 100,000, similar to the Finance Commission, and I do want to reiterate again that was Netflix's preferred position. Anything greater than inflation, they were going to start to feel as if they're being targeted. And I told them I would continue to reiterate their stance. So that would get you about 400,000. You're now at about 750,000. I think if you have a target, you would need to do a little bit on the retailing gross receipt side also. Otherwise, you're probably somewhere in the $750,000, $800,000 range right now.
Okay, so maybe a 40 to 50%.
So currently, if you look at retailing, I'm gonna say yes. If you did something, I'd say anywhere between 30 and 50% also, that would get you in that range.
Okay, so I would suggest 40%. I'm not making a motion yet. I'd really like to hear from some other folks as well.
I want to make sure I understand what you just said. So we had Model 1, we talked about increasing it 30%. Then you mentioned retailing. Retailing is not part of Model 1?
That's correct. So we basically have three components to our ordinance. We have the component, which are all our flat fees. And that was what I had up on the screen earlier. There could be, retail, what you might consider retailing type functions in those descriptions, but they pay a flat fee. Then we have two gross receipts tables. One is retailing, I think the way you're thinking of it, which is, transactions, between a business, a brick and mortar business and a customer. And that is the gross receipts we currently have. And then we have the second gross receipts table, which is the one referred to as e-commerce, manufacturing, wholesaling, and jobbing. And that is where, obviously with e-commerce is where Netflix pays within that table. And so I believe what the council member just stated was take a little bit of Model 1 and increase it another 10% from the model in the staff report. Take the Model 3 and move the staff recommendation from 300% down to 100% to mirror what the Finance Commission did. And then I believe he said perhaps 40% on the retailing side. And once again, I would reiterate, if you are going to touch the retailing table, I would suggest touching the existing retailing table and not adding the two new tiers that the Finance Commission started to discuss.
And that's exactly what I was considering, but I don't know what the total is from that. But It sounds like we're getting close to 1 million.
If you were to do the retailing portion also, yes, you're very close. And then Councilmember, I believe you were discussing the CPI as it relates only to the flat fees. Or are you saying across the board, just the flat fees?
Yeah, there's no need to do it on the gross receipts because those receipts increase with inflation. So it only to be to implement a CPI on the flat fee.
Thank you.
So let's go to the Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I agree almost completely with Councilmember Hudes. I mean, I think the problems we're trying to solve are, we do need to raise more revenue, and our businesses use our services, use our sidewalks, use our roads, et cetera. And so, you know, the fact that Assistant Town Manager Andrews went through all the different approaches and the different groups that are now paying into the town, you know, increasing TOT, increasing sales tax, modernizing our business license, and the next thing will be talking to our residents. We are not trying to solve this all with one silver bullet. We've got a lot of different approaches. I think the business license modernization, as we're moving forward, I do want to make sure that, you know, one, it increases revenue. So we need to do something somewhat substantial. And I also would like to see us move away from the regressive nature. Model 1 just doesn't work for me at all. Not only does it not raise enough money, it retains our regressive structure right now. And then the last thing that I think was brought up with the COLA, I think we do want to make an adjustment for the flat fees so that it keeps some pace with inflation, so that we are not sitting here 10 or 30 years later saying this isn't keeping up. I think it's really good to bake in a rate change that is tied to CPI. I'm not quite ready to go on Model 3. I like Model 3 with something added to change the flat rate, but I don't really want to go down from 300% to 100%. I'd be looking at more 200%. I think there's been a lot of outreach on the part of our staff with the top 5 businesses that are over $12 million. And to the extent that Model 3 had been discussed, I think something less than that would be palatable to them. I don't think we have to go down to 100%. Did I hit the points?
You did. I do want to say for the record, though, council member, we attempted outreach to all 5 of those businesses, but we've only had discussions with Netflix. We have yet to hear back from the other 4 businesses. So I don't want to portray it as if we were able to speak to all 5 of those businesses that would be impacted. We've only had the 3 discussions with Netflix.
Okay. And then anecdotally, I'll say that, you know, between getting my bike fixed and talking to the shop owner at the bike shop, they're fine with that. They said their success should pay into the town. My hairdresser pointed out that there were a lot of service people during the pandemic that did not, you know, maybe were working from home or not working and stopped paying their business license. She said if we set up an Amnesty program, she would be an ambassador. She could probably find 40 people to sign up. So I think secondarily, we want to get to that. And I think with an Amnesty program, make sure that we're bringing more people into getting their business licenses. But I think I've probably talked to about 12 shop owners. I think they all understand the ask. Nobody wants to pay higher taxes, but I think nobody also wants to see the level of service diminish, not be able to get a permit to remodel something, not be able to have the sidewalks cleaned. So, you know, we really do have a problem to solve. And I think we're almost there with this.
Okay, Councilmember Badami.
Thank you. So yes, I'm very interested in the Amnesty program for equity's sake, and the sooner the better. I'm pretty well aligned with the comments made by the Vice Mayor and Councilmember Hudes, and I understand we need a 4/5 vote tonight to get an ordinance on the ballot. So I would be interested if Councilmember Hudes, which I think he was close to making a motion, I would be interested in hearing that if he's ready for that, notwithstanding comments from Councilmember Sayak or Mayor Rennie.
I will add one thing. The amendments are pretty complex. And so if the council is interested in making changes to to any of the proposals, I'd like to ask that staff have an opportunity to amend the ballot question and the proposed ordinance and bring that back to the council so that the council can vote on the actual language.
And that would have to be a special meeting before August 12th.
It would.
And from a staff perspective, we can facilitate that. I think a vote this evening would still send a clear signal that, we should work on any resolution or draft language that would be encompassed in a vote tonight.
Okay, I can say that I'm also aligned with Councilmember Udis. So if he wants to make a motion, I would be happy to hear it.
Yeah, were there any other council members that wanted to speak before I did? Okay.
No other hands are up at this time.
Okay. So I would move to provide direction toward Model 3, but in Model 3 to reduce the gross receipts increase for that group of companies to a 100% increase, to increase the retail gross receipts to 40%, and to increase the flat fee by 30%, and to implement a CPI adjustment on the 30% on an ongoing basis. Since that is what would be, I think, necessary to draft ballot measure, I would stop there, and then I may have a second motion on the amnesty and collecting the other tax, but I don't think it's related to the ballot measure.
Let me start with, well, Councilmember Badami, I assume you'd like to second?
Yeah, I was going to second that.
Town manager, clarification, I guess?
Yes, thank you. Just clarification. Typically ordinances that would have a CPI increase would do it on an annual basis, and staff would recommend that we use the Bay Area Consumer Price Index. So just a little bit of technicality, but I think if it's okay with the maker of the motion, it would help with our drafting of the documents.
I think that would be perfectly fine.
And okay with a seconder also?
Yes.
Vice Mayor Risto?
I don't know if the maker and the seconder of the motion would entertain considering having the gross receipts on e-commerce and the manufacturers be 150 or 200% instead of 100%. I'm just looking at this,
So I would be open to a different amount if it added to a different total. So I would be interested in knowing whether town staff could do a calculation, say, on the 200%, and what the total of all three of these would be if we were to do 200%.
Thank you.
And so thank you. So each increment on the e-commerce manufacturing gross receipts table, each increment of 100% is roughly 400,000. And so going from 100 to 200 is roughly another 400,000. Going from 100 to 150,000 would be roughly another 200,000. And so that would be there. And so you're still, with the motion the way it is, you are probably very close to the 1.1 million. This would be additive. And I gave Netflix my word. I would reiterate it again. Anything that starts to get to above 117%, they will weigh in.
Yeah, I mean, given that, and given that we're dealing with a $2 million structural deficit, and we have other levers to pull yet, so I think there are about 5 or 6 other things that we can do on that. I would prefer to stay with my motion at 100% and see where that goes.
Okay, Vice Mayor, you still have your hand up?
Yes. Would you consider 120%? Yes, to basically get us to inflation.
I would be okay with that. Yes, I could amend the motion to 120% that group.
Is that okay with a seconder?
Yes.
Thank you.
I like good compromise. Any other comments before we move? Seeing none, I'll call the question then on this motion. Vice Mayor Risto,
Aye.
Councilmember Sayak,
Aye.
Councilmember Badami,
Aye.
Councilmember Hudes.
Aye.
And the mayor votes aye, so passes unanimously. Councilmember Hudes, did you have another motion you'd like to consider?
Yes, this really is not related to the ballot measure, and I know that staff has done some excellent work on initiating additional collections based on some of the federal and state government reporting about businesses in town. But I think it's clear that Los Gatos is not collecting from certain businesses that are operating in town. So what I would suggest is that we that staff report back to the council, perhaps at the time of the mid-year budget, which I think is in February, with an estimate on increasing compliance with business licensing, especially the home-based businesses, or especially the businesses that are not currently reporting, and include a specific projection of additional revenues in 2022, 23, and 24, as well as the specific programs that would be implemented, such as Amnesty followed by enhanced enforcement. So that would give us a timeline for addressing this additional revenue source that I think is important.
And staff would be happy to do that.
So I could turn that into a motion, if that's okay.
Well, that item isn't really on the agenda, so I think it would be good to treat it as a council member asking for information from staff, and staff will place it on a future agenda for discussion.
Okay, that's fine, but I do want to do it in a way that we can hit that mid-year budget point, because it would make sense to do it with that. So if that's okay, then I'm okay with that.
And I believe the timing syncs up well, because staff would have recommended waiting till after the election, because you don't want to, complicate what is already going to be a discussion. And so the mid-year around February should sync up well.
Okay, Vice Mayor.
Thank you. I concur. I would like to, I think it would be good to come forward with an amnesty program, how we can roll that out after we've we've modernized our business license, assuming that passes. I guess we're asking that to be agendized, or we're just requesting that work be done, but I would like to see that as well.
Okay, yeah, so that's a request to agendize it for future discussion, but what I'm hearing, we're going to do the agendizing after the election cycle. All right. Any other motions on this? So I don't see any. So I believe the next steps is then we're going to have to plan a special meeting for next week for staff to bring back for us ballot language for us to approve. So it should be a very short meeting, hopefully. And I believe this is our last agenda item then. So if nobody has anything else, I will adjourn our meeting. All right. Good work, everybody. I liked it. It was quick. We didn't even get to break time. So thank you. We'll see you all next week, and staff will get back with what day the meeting works for everybody. Thanks. Bye-bye.
Thank you.